Welcome, everybody, to the Thrivestry Podcast, mastering the art of thriving at life, where we talk about creating change in our lives and in the world around us. I'm your host, Jeremy Jones, and this is my other host, Gigi. Say hi, Gigi.
Hi.
Gigi's real name is Genevieve. I don't know if you guys know that, but that's the trivia of the day. So, but we like calling her Gigi. I'm JJ. She's Gigi. It works out. So today what we're going to talk about is another sort of tool, and I talked about this before with kind of the increasing the average and just sort of the plus minus format, where we just think about the last couple days of a particular thing we're trying to change, whether it's nutrition or fitness or some other part of our life that we're trying to create change in. And I saw an article by James Clear, one of my favorite guys for creating changes in habits, and I think the article is from about 5 years ago, so it's not new. But what he's talking about is, not trying to measure forward, but measuring backward. And what he's talking about is something similar, where we're just going to look back at the previous week, and we need to make sure that we're getting some sort of feedback, because immediate feedback from the most recent things is much more important for creating long-term change than setting up all this organization and plans ahead of time and looking to our far-reaching goals. It's much more important to kind of know where we're at right now. And I talk about this a lot in my programming stuff. It's the OODA loop, the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. And it's one of the ways that we can always be, putting ourselves in a perspective, so we can, pick which things we want to do, right? And then the article we wanted to go over today was one in the Wall Street Journal a couple days ago, basically why men won't go to the doctor, right? And it's really interesting seeing some of the statistics of how little men will actually go see a physician. And Gigi and I already talked about this a little bit. And I have to confess that I don't think I've been to the doctor in over 10 years, maybe more, which, is a good thing, but it's also kind of could be a bad thing, right? Because there could be something going on I don't know about. Why is that? And this article was going over ways of almost tricking men into going to see the doctor and getting some other tests done, and being more proactive about their health versus reactive and basically waiting until they die or they can't pee anymore.
I just want to say, before you go on, with respect to this article, as a woman, I have very specific views and triggers reading this article. So for any women that are listening to this podcast that are like, I don't really give a fuck, neither do I. And we're going to talk about that, and I can't wait.
Well, and not to go into it too much right now, but I think what is interesting is it's an extreme case, but it's real, and they're figuring out ways around it. But how do we apply this to, like, for the gym, for example, and that people don't want to go to the gym? Everyone knows they need to have some sort of fitness routine to make them healthier. But as fitness professionals, as coaches and whatever, it's our job to almost trick people, into doing these things, and doing things that we know that they need to do, but they just don't want to do or don't have the motivation to do. So that's how I'm going to kind of approach that article. So it's not just about the men issue, men's health. But let's talk about this habit thing. What sort of metrics are you tracking now, Gigi? Do you measure anything? Do you track anything kind of from a health and fitness or a habit realm?
Yeah, I always look at three main things. One is my stress, and like how stressed out I am on a day-to-day basis. That's my overall litmus test that I use. Second is my sleep. And then the third thing is how many times did I get to lift weights? I have a very active lifestyle, so I don't need to track that. I have 3 kids. We do lots of sports, so that I don't have to track that because it's built into our lifestyle already. It's a habit that's already been formed. But those are the 3 things that I look at. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Sometimes you measure things because they're easy to measure, like just paying attention to how much sleep you got, and it was a good, the quality and the quantity. But sometimes you measure things that you need to focus on because other things aren't much of a problem. Like if you're already, if you're already pretty lean and you've already got really good routines set up around your food, you don't need to focus on that. It's kind of wasted effort. One of my favorite sort of concepts that I learned from martial arts was, in the beginning, it takes an ounce of effort to produce a pound of results. And in the end, it takes a pound of effort to create an ounce of results. And this is very true when it comes to fitness. Going from 30% body fat to 25 or 20 is a lot easier than going from 15 to 10. And same thing too when you're trying to add, go from 150 pound back squat to 175. That is much easier than going from 375 to 400. Even though it's a smaller percentage of the total, it's because physics get involved and other things get involved. And so, I think a lot of people will tend to kind of get hyper focused on something because they like doing it and they're already pretty good at it. And so they'll keep putting all this effort into that thing that they're already 80% of the way there, when they could spend a lot less effort on something that would give them a much better return. And this is actually what I do when I program, right? When I create the workouts and sort of the programs for people, I'm always thinking about, because we're trying to be fit across as many domains as possible. And I was just actually writing an article today about, kind of the multi-tool, example of fitness, or the EDC, everyday carry, or the little black dress is another analogy I use, or Marie Kondoing your fitness priorities. It's all in the same article. And it's basically saying like, one of the analogies I came up with is if you had to go on a trip, and it was going to be a long extended trip, and you only had a small backpack or a small handbag to bring with you to pack everything, you're going to want to make sure that you bring stuff that's multi-use, lightweight and multi-purpose, right? So you think things that you can use in lots of different scenarios and aren't going to weigh you down a whole lot, right? And so that's the way our fitness should be. Our fitness should allow us to do many different things, and it shouldn't be a big burden on us. That's the lightweight part. And it should be something that comes up, we use regularly. We shouldn't pack something or train for something that almost is never going to show up. And so going back to this concept of sort of measuring and tracking, if you're focusing on one domain, specializing in one domain, but you're lacking something else, we can put a little bit of effort over here where your capacity is really reduced, and that brings up the overall average much, much better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. And it also, I always struggle with kind of the mental load of this stuff, right? And what you're suggesting is that you don't really need to focus on the stuff that you're already good at and that you're already getting a baseline of. Don't worry about it. But do this instead and do this instead, and that's going to give you a bigger return and a bigger it's just a better use of your resources, right? And
yeah, exactly. Even if you have some extra time and energy to devote to something, instead of trying to focus on the thing that that's already doing pretty well, unless you plan on it's okay to spend a period of time focusing on something very specific, even though you're already good at it, because maybe it's motivating you and you want to do well at this race, or you want to do really good. There's a really big thing at work that you have to push through. That's fine. But in general, if you have the time and the resources, you should be spending it on the areas where you need the most help, where you have the most room to grow. That's going to give you the best return on your investment. But going back to this, just measuring and getting feedback on the most recent thing, this is one of the reasons why I'm so big on recording your workouts. So if you're going, in your training, you should actually have something that you're measuring, whether it's, the loads on your lifts, or, max reps of something like pull-ups or push-ups, or benchmarks, right? And so I program usually 2 workouts that are going to be are old school benchmarks, or ones that I've been doing for years. And then I'm going to repeat 2 or 3 workouts from the previous 6 months or a year, sometimes even 2 years. But it's just a regular workout. And then usually 2 or 3 new workouts. So it kind of depends each week. Some week we may only do 1 new workout. Some week we might do 3 or 4. But these are all averages. And by constantly recording them, you can go back. And one of the reasons I like recording is, one of the biggest reasons is just so that that you've trained 3 or 4 days last week, right? You're just trying to be consistent. And not necessarily looking at the performances exactly, but just checking it off. I did this. And if you put in the numbers that you did it, that's like the easiest way to measure. It's kind of like measuring sleep hours. But what's great is if you're consistent with measuring, then you can go back and see that workout from 6 months ago, which is a relatively short time when it comes to training, kind of physical changes in the body. That short-term measurement is going to give you feedback. Did you improve? Where didn't you? Well, maybe you got worse here,
Yeah.
Sort of
There's no bullshit in that, right? My coach always says to me, okay, Gigi, I'm supposed to work out 4 times a week, and I never do, because I'm a single mom with 3 kids, and I've got work to do, and there's snow days and whatever, shit happens. And I have come to terms with that. But then the problem is that I think, like, at this point, I'm too laid back with it, right? And I've got like, well, I really am behind in the laundry, and I have to get the laundry done. It's like, do you, like, is that really a priority? You know? So anyway, so my coach is really good with, at the end of every month, he's like, okay, so this month, how many times did you work out? And I'm like, well, you know, I think it was probably like 10 or 12. And he's like, it was 6. So, you know, and he's like really good at just being like, you can't fool the data, right? Whereas it's a lot different when you're tracking things versus kind of how you felt about it. So then when you're a regular old gym goer and you're kind of like, well, I've been at this gym and I'm not really getting the results that you want. If you're tracking it, you can look back and see, like, is it the gym's fault I'm not getting my results, or is it my fault? You know, and like, I feel like I've been sleeping a lot better, but you go back and look at the data and you're like, nah, I really have been, actually, like that. No, I'm thinking about it a lot, not actually doing the thing, right? So you can't fool the data. You know?
Yeah, that I think is one of the biggest takeaways here is by recording for the last, you know, 4 or 5 days or last week, you know, that plus minus method, just having something that just gives you the real data, so you're not trying to think, oh yeah, like I had the last couple of weeks has been pretty good, and I'm always shocked. I mean, this is again coming from a science background like you, like it's always shocking when you think you remember something and you'd like bet money on it, you'd swear on it, and then you go look at your notes or you're like, oh well, that wasn't it at all, you know. You know, and like for me, like it's definitely like, oh yeah, I've been training pretty good for the last few weeks, and then I go look and I'm like, no, I haven't. That was like maybe 2 weeks that I've been good consistently.
Well, it's a really good way to hold yourself accountable, right? Like that, like it's great data to give to someone else so that they can hold you accountable, but you can also call your own bullshit at that point. But then the trick, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but for me, is to, like, if I have not been good at all, to not fall down like a shame spiral kind of thing, right? Where I'm like, oh, I'm so terrible. Like I've been trying so hard and I've only done this. And I know that that's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like to look back. And it's that like forward looking mentality, like whatever's in the past, you can't change. There's nothing you can do about it. Just do the next thing, do the next thing, do the next thing, which is really good to do, but not if you're trying to like hold yourself accountable and stuff, right? So you need to have a balance, I think, right?
Yeah, and that's that plus minus method where you're really only worried about the most recent feedback. You know, in this article he talks about like using, like if you're an entrepreneur or you're tracking your blog hits or whatever, you can't make decisions based on what happened 2 years ago. You know, that's just too far, and that's not really good. You need to know what you've been doing recently, and you shouldn't be so like if you haven't worked out in 20 years or you haven't, you know, you've had like a 1 year hiatus. You shouldn't beat yourself up over that and be like, I'm such a failure, and just be like, I haven't worked out in a few days. You know, I need to plan to do a workout. And then the technique I really enjoy is the on off versus the scale 1 to 10. You know, when it comes to exercise, especially, and this is true for food and other things too, you don't always have to, it's not 0 or 10. You know, and I fall into this trap pretty regularly because I create workout programming and I live in the fitness world where, like, if I can't, you know, carve out an hour and a half of my time, 2 hours of my time, do all this stuff that I want to get done and wear this big rubber suit, which is a whole nother story that I have to tell you about. It's not the gimp suit, it's something different, but it looks kind of like the gimp suit. I look more like Scuba Steve from Big Daddy. But I wear this sweatsuit and I'm like, oh, I don't have time to put on my sweats and my sweatsuit, and like, you know, oh, I'm just not going to work out then. You know, and it's not, that's not how it works. Like, you know, or I'm tired, I don't have a lot of time, you know, I've got laundry to do. Instead of saying, you know what is a 1 on that scale? You know, is it a set of squats and a set of push-ups and that's it? You know, you can do a 1 today. You can do 1 just about any day, you know, and how can, okay, a lot of times once you start and you get the 1 or 2, you just go in the mindset, I'm just going to, you know, do some mobility and, you know, do some rehab stuff. And then you're like, oh, I feel pretty good. I'm going to do a set of 20 air squats. And you're like, okay, I'm going to do a set of push-ups. And like, all right. And then, okay, maybe I'll do 2 sets. And you're like, oh, I feel pretty good. I'm going to, you know, and then it builds from there. But in general, you should be happy with just the 1 or 2. And then some days will be a 10, you know, but ideally, you know, you're doing something versus it's not all or nothing when it comes to these things. And so again, not beating yourself up over having a failure for a week or 2 or a year, you know, just thinking back the last few days and saying, you know, I've been kind of sucking lately, you know, like, no big deal. I'm going to get a 1 today. Just got to start somewhere. Right.
I like it.
Things that I measure personally is the frequency of my workouts, and I do track some of my workouts, but for the most part, at this point, like I'm just at a phase where I just want to make sure that I'm trying to get some sort of fitnessing in, 3 or 4 times a week, and I try to average more than I need, right? Because if I, I always talk about everybody should try to train no more than 4 days in a row and try to avoid having more than 2 days off, right? And that's going to cover your, Monday, Wednesday, Friday people. It's going to cover, 3 on, 1 off. It's going to cover everything. And that's going to get really 95% of people. If you get into that realm, you're going to be good. More than 4 days in a row, especially with Thrivestry, you're going to start over time. It'll start to weigh you down, right? It'll start to beat you up a little bit. So if you do come 5 days a week, you just want to take like either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, maybe at a lower intensity. So that you can make sure that you're not outpacing your ability to recover, so there's ways around that. And so the reason why I want to say you want to round up a little bit is because of the natural scheduling issues that we all run into. So if you're trying to get an average of 3 to 4 workouts per week, and you do a few weeks of 4, and then you miss a week, your average is still going to be pretty good. So you should try to come a little bit more than you need because of life, right? Life's going to happen. You're going to get sick, you're going to get busy, you're going to go on a trip, all these things. And so I try to round up, so I try to get some lifting in, I try to do a lift and a Metcon, 2 or 3 times a week. And then I try to do, either a longer Metcon or lately I've been doing a lot more just outdoor activities. So just going on hikes and trail runs and putting the backpack on and doing the ruck marches, just to get outside more, just trying to get outside in nature more. But that's one of the things I track. The other thing I go through periods where I'll track macros and stuff just to see where I'm at. And I tend to undereat, believe it or not, because I'm so limited because I can't eat gluten or corn. And I'm fine with missing meals. It doesn't bother me. So I get so distracted that I'll go hours, without eating. So sometimes, I'll eat dinner the night before at like 7 or 8 at night, and then I won't eat again until 3 or 4 the next day. And I'm not even really hungry. That's not what I consider healthy. And especially with exercise and training, I need to make sure that I'm maintaining, the right amount of protein and calories to sustain my body weight. So I track macros a little bit. I definitely pay attention to sleep, but I'm pretty good with sleep. So it's more along the lines of, if I do get a bad night's sleep or 2, I deliberately make sure the next couple of days I'm going to get more sleep,
Yeah. So that's how you use like that plus minus effect, right? So if you're looking back like 3 days and you're like plus minus minus, then okay, I'm down. So I need to go
plus.
To make a point to go plus, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And getting that immediate feedback, just measuring the last couple of days. The same thing goes with family time, like sometimes it's easy to get distracted and busy with work and whatever. And I realize that I haven't, hung out with Jamie or Jax. And so I make sure I'm going to spend quality time with them, or, I'm looking at the schedule, seeing, okay, where can I, instead of just going into the default where I'm going to work at night, and get this stuff done. Oh, I can't wait to get this stuff done. I'll be like, you know what? That stuff can wait until tomorrow. I'm going to hang out with the family. Cool. When it comes to, I'm trying to think of what other things can people track that's,
oh my God, there's so much that they can track. You can track your water intake. You can track your mobility. You can track, like I said, I track my stress level because that's a pretty good indicator.
Do you just have like it was stressful and not stressful, or do you have like a scale?
It's just yes or no. Yeah. That's a good question. I've never actually had to talk about it out loud.
I was curious when you mentioned it. I was like, oh, I wonder how she measures stress.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's if I'm stressed out, I'm not sleeping and I don't eat properly and I run myself into the ground, right? So I kind of have to like do a check at the end of every day and just be like, okay, so like I check in with myself, right? And then if I am stressed out, then I usually will just shut down and just be like, no, the laundry can wait, the dishes can wait, that project can wait, that can wait, go to, and if my stress is good and at the end of the day I feel good, then I'll stay up and I'll like do stuff, not stay up late, but just not go to bed, right? So that's kind of like how I handle at the end of the day. If I'm super stressed out, there's nothing that I can do about it at that point. So just go to bed. right?
Yeah,
Because
I
staying
was
up
going
is
to
not.
ask, what are do you have specific coping things that are life-giving or stress reducing? Some people it's just stop working and read a nice book and go to bed early. That's an easy one. Take a nice bath, or do yoga or something, meditate. Those sort of things are ways that you can are proactive ways. Because I think a lot of times when people think about stress, they only think about how do I reduce the stress? And sometimes that's not an option. When you just have life going on, it's not like you can just be like, well, I'm not going to go to that meeting or take my kid to that practice. I'm just going to sit home. Like,
Yeah, totally. I don't have those options at all. Like if I don't work, then there's no money. And if I don't want to take my kid, then nobody takes the kid. Right. So I have a lot of responsibilities. So for me, it's like, I don't have an option of skipping stuff or taking the weekend off or, taking it easy for a few days. Like that just doesn't exist in my world. Right. Um, so that's why my go-to is sleep. But that's on top of like getting outside and making sure I'm working out and eating, drinking too much and not eating too much sugar and like all that other stress management stuff. Right. But yeah, there's so much stuff you can track. You can track like, your outside time. That's a really, really important one. Most people don't spend enough time outside. I'm part of a group. It's hashtag 150 hours outside. Hashtag 150 hours outside, I think is what it is. And it's basically the goal is for you and your family to be outside for 40 minutes a day or something like that. Or it's like an hour every day, every season, or I've never really figured it out, but it's just all like, I've never figured out the details. I don't care. Because the point is that it encourages you to just spend time outside, especially with your kids. Because it's so easy to just default to being inside and doing stuff inside. And then you'll go a couple days without being outside at all. If it's raining for a few days or if it's too hot for a few days. And then,
yeah, well, I think that's a good point. Like it's easy for us when we're stressed out and busy, we're working from home. We don't want to go anywhere. And we just let our kids sit inside and watch TV or play video games, instead of purposely going out and doing an activity and taking them to the park or making them play outside or whatever. It's easy when we get stressed out that they pay the price, right? And there could be compromises and you take them to the park and maybe you get some work done. At least they're outside, you're outside, you're getting work done, but at least they're not sitting on the TV or whatever.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So outside time, I think, is a really important one that people track. Screen time, even for adults, I think is super important, right?
Yeah. All our phones now tell you how much time you're spending on every app and how much time you're on the phone every day. And the more you can reduce that, the better.
I got a landline for my house. And now when I get home, my phone gets put away. If someone wants to call me, they just call my landline. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I do the no social media Sundays, and if I do use the computer, I try to avoid using the computer at all. But I'll just watch fun YouTube videos or whatever, something, or maybe read articles, kind of like it's the new version of the newspaper or whatever. But I try to stay off. I stay off social media, and I'm trying to increase that to other days of the week. Maybe not completely off, but like not after a certain time. That sort of thing, because I can get sucked in really easily. One thing that's really interesting is, speaking of phones and how they measure things, is all the tracking apps, or tracking devices like the Fitbit, and this is an iWatch, heart rate monitors and all that stuff. And what's great about that, so far the evidence has shown it doesn't make people any fitter. Right? There's no, like, wearing a Fitbit like over the long term doesn't really make people walk more or do fitness more, believe it or not. So it's not a way, buying that thing might get you excited in the moment and you have this money invested. And so now, it's buzzing you. Really quickly do people just adapt back to their normal, procedure of just ignoring it, go back to their usual defaults. But the benefit is if you are wearing it for tracking, it does at least automatically record something, so, if you're using it, you can use it for sleep. I remember I bought the Zeo sleep tracker, which is this thing you wore on your head at night, and it measured your brain waves. Unfortunately, they went bankrupt, but the app still worked for a long time after. I haven't busted it out in a long time, but it measured your deep wave and your REM sleep, and it measured all these things, and it graphed it out, and it gave you a score at the end of the day, total time and all that stuff. And that was really great because it motivated me to change some of my sleeping habits enough to where, even though I don't use it anymore, I still, do the right things to get the most out of it. For my watch, I still turn it on when I work out, and it does measure heart rate and things like that. Not that I'm trying to hit certain heart rate zones or whatever. It's more along the lines of, I just want to make sure that I'm recording that I worked out, and that my heart rate was an average of a certain level for a certain amount of time. That's another good one. And also, like, the watch does tell me to get up if I've been sitting for too long. And so that's really good. It tells me, a lot of times I ignore it if I'm in the middle of something important. But I might get up and walk around. I might do some prehab mobility stuff, so those little things can help you track, immediate feedback, immediate data to again, plan for tomorrow and the next day, not necessarily worrying about the long-term ramifications, because that if you continue to make 1% improvements every day, every week, that compounds into big changes in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about this article. I love this. I love the picture here at the beginning. Let me see if I can show.
The hat.
The hat. Yeah, so it has this dude in a gown hiding behind a big cowboy hat from the doctor. It was a giant hand with a stethoscope. And I think that the premise here is that or kind of what they talk about is how men go to the doctor far fewer. And it was really funny talking to Gigi. She's like, yeah, I think women just go to the doctor more. She's like, well, partially because we have kids, and like, when you're pregnant and all that stuff, like, you have to get checked out more. And I don't know. I maybe it's just the male in me, but I feel like women's bodies are more complicated, so they definitely need more attention.
Is that what you think? That is so far from the truth.
I know, but that's kind of like what my simple brain wants to like think, like, no, that's not true at all. Like, that's ridiculous. But I think what was really interesting was some of the statistics. And they say there's a lot of men who the last doctor they see is their pediatrician, and they don't go back to the doctor until their 40s or 50s. And it says here, like, most men they only go to the doctor when they're extremely sick. They say that they're healthy, they have no reason to go. I'm afraid of learning that something is wrong with me, which is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Like, the sooner you find out something's wrong with you, the easier it is to fix and correct. People, they say they like to treat themselves naturally. They don't like doctors. They don't have time to go, and they don't have health insurance is another one in the States. But it's interesting that, almost 6 in 10 men say there are things that keep them from going to the doctor, and those are the most common ones. And I think what was some of the things that they point out was that men tend to, in our society, saying I'm sick or I need help from a doctor is a sign of weakness. Right. And men are taught to not, show that weakness. And I think another one too is I want to fix it myself. Like, I don't, I want to try to I want to take care of it myself. I don't want to burden anybody else. I don't want to, it's not that I don't want help. It's just that I don't want to burden anybody else. Like, I can do it myself, which is a problem. And it's really hard. It's something that I struggle with all the time, whether it's my health or my business. Is like, I'm always like, well, I can take care of it myself. Especially when it comes to health, because I'm, a health guy, like, I know so much. But at the same time, I've been thinking a lot about this. I'm turning 40 this year, and I was like, I do need to go get a physical and get my blood checked, my blood pressure and all that stuff, and see if there's anything going on I don't know about. But what I thought was interesting about this article was that it goes on to talk about what they've been doing is tricking men.
All right. Okay. I have to stop you there, because before you go on to why you think that this is important, I have to say why I don't care at all. Like, okay. No part of me cares about anything in this article about the 21%, 20.5% of men who haven't been to the doctor in the last year. Like, I don't care, because there are so much more. As a woman, I'm like, okay, you have this whole healthcare system that is literally designed around your bodies to treat your problems. Women have really serious issues that are being completely ignored. We go to the doctor and they're still not able to fix us. And you guys go, you've got everything. You don't go, you've got everything there at your fingertips, and you still don't even go because of some sociological thing that you've got stuck in your head. Like, I don't care. Like, literally no part of me cares. And I have, like, there's like really important stats about this, right? So like, women have heart attack, like, our symptoms for heart attacks are completely different than men's. We don't get chest pain. We don't get shoulder on your left side. None of that stuff happens to women. It's completely different symptoms, which is like not common knowledge. This is literally half the population that we're talking about here. And it's not common knowledge what symptoms are for a heart attack. So because of that, women's heart attack survival rates 5 years after they have a heart attack is 50%. For a man, survival rates are not survival rates, the opposite. So 35% of men 5 years after they've had a heart attack will not survive. 50% of women will not survive.
But more men have heart attacks.
No, they don't.
The rate of heart attacks is the same for men and women?
It's the same. It's the same. You want to know about strokes? So between 1993 and 2010, men's rate of stroke went from 275 to 200 for every to under 200 for every 100,000 men. Mm-hmm. So that's a 30% reduction in strokes for men. For women, it stayed exactly the same, 250 in every 100,000 people. So now women experience more heart attacks, the same amount of heart attacks and more strokes. And there is no research. Like, it's so clear we stayed the same over a 20-year period because there's no funding going to research women's health. And you guys are like, well, we don't go to the doctor because we don't like to tell people that we're weak. And I'm like, dude, one of the other statistics here, on average, a woman will wait 6.5 years from the times they first experience symptoms until they obtain a diagnosis for a urinary problem. 6.5 years of going back and forth to the doctor. Like, we go and they still can't look after us because the healthcare system is so skewed. So like literally.
You think it's skewed toward women?
No, it's skewed towards men because all of the research funding goes
What about how many breast cancer fundraisers have you heard of in the last 10 years versus how many testicular cancer fundraisers have you heard about? So,
are you seriously bringing that up? Like, that's like one thing.
Well, I'm using it as an example that like there's a lot more attention put to certain, like you said, it's way skewed toward the men's side, but I'm like, that's not necessarily true. There are situations where, like, you brought up some specific examples. I was bringing up a specific example. That
I have way more specific examples than just one type of cancer fundraiser. So a bunch of women get together and raise money for breast cancer every year. Like, that doesn't change anything about the fact that we're still dying more often from heart attacks, significantly more often from heart attacks, dying significantly more often from strokes.
But men die more often, period.
Because they don't go to the doctor. Whose fault is that?
But like you mentioned, like the urinary tract thing. I don't know the statistics for the men. Is it more common? Do men get their urinary tract infections or problems solved sooner? We'd have to see what the comparable.
Not only do they get solved sooner, 80% of people who experience urinary tract or urinary issues, dysfunction, are women. 80%. And it still takes 6.5 years to
How long does it take for men to get their stuff straightened out?
18 months.
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Maybe women's bodies are a little more complicated than men's.
Yeah, because you guys get all the research done. They're not more complicated or not. They're just, you want to know what else? 30% of clinical trial subjects in cardiovascular research are women. 30%.
Maybe it's because women aren't signing up for those trials.
No, you wouldn't sign up for that. Like, a doctor would just say, here's what you've got to do, right?
You have to agree to it, right? You have to agree to it. Yeah, it's interesting that you went this direction with this. This isn't the direction I was.
Because I couldn't even, honestly, you sent me that article and like, I couldn't even finish reading it because I was just like, I honestly don't even care. Like, there's so many issues. I know so many people that have struggled with depression and been told because they're a woman that they're just hysterical and that there's nothing wrong with them. Women experience mental health twice as often as men, and we are diagnosed or misdiagnosed 50% of the time.
But there is, I mean, even with that in mind, there's like certain things are more common for men, like schizophrenia and things like that, and autism spectrum is usually more on the male side, right?
It depends how you look at the diagnosis, though, right? So like ASD has more severe people as men, but less severe as women, right? So like women
so they might not even be getting diagnosed. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, well, and the other thing too about that is that women are like some of the major things, characteristics of autism, women are taught to do from a very early age, like make eye contact, sit still. Like whereas a boy, it's like, oh, boys will be boys, and they're allowed to kind of carry on with the autistic symptoms, and then they, like, when they're like 10, like, something's not right. But the girl has been trained to like sit still and like,
Mm-hmm.
do all that. So they have the same exact neurological issues, but just one behaviorally has been trained that it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, but it is interesting you mentioned those statistics, because this graph here shows that men have much high blood pressure, almost double the amount of diabetes, higher cancer rates and higher heart disease rates than women. Women, the only thing that they had higher was arthritis on these five metrics. And so, you say like, oh, like women have these higher this and that. Well, men have their higher things too. And maybe it's true that and I'm not arguing that the medical system isn't somewhat geared toward men, because it's been dominated by men researchers and physicians, right? And
this
so
is like these specific things that you've said. Is this what you're on right now? These risky behavior things? No,
it's
high blood pressure.
Right. These chronic conditions are more common among men than women.
So the other thing, the chart right beside it is this risky behavior one.
Yeah.
So again, like, okay, so if you're more likely to smoke cigarettes, you're more likely to get cancer, right? If you're drinking a lot more, then you're more likely to have high blood pressure and diabetes, right? So it's like you bring these things on yourselves.
If there are certain things that bring on some of the things that you mentioned for women too that are preventable, like there's certain what?
Like having kids?
That's part of it, but no, I was talking about just lifestyle activities, there's certain things that are preventable too. It's just again showing that men have higher rates of this, they have higher death rates, they have higher rates of this, in these specific cases. And so there is some more research going toward these cases, but like I said, there's been far more money spent on certain women's conditions than there has been on a similar version for men. The reason why I thought this article was interesting is that I do think that you're absolutely right. Maybe there should be more research on women's conditions, especially when it's far outpaced. Like I know about the women's heart attack thing, and it even mentions that in this article that the outcomes for women in heart attacks are not as good as they are for men because there's been so much more men. I was under the impression that men do have heart attacks more frequently than women. But again, it could be
because they have different symptoms, right? So a lot of the time,
due to misdiagnosis, possibly
they go unreported or misdiagnosed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the article goes on to talk about how the way that they're tricking people into coming to the doctor more often is to basically go through the urology department, because the number one reason why men will go to the doctor is because they can't get an erection and they can't pee. So the urology department is like the gatekeeper for a lot of men's health. And so what they started to do is turn the urology departments into something that's a little bit more like a barbershop, where they can come and hang out and sports memorabilia, and it's less intimidating, and kind of, then they can go in and talk to them about their blood pressure and about their diabetes and these health markers that are really important. And to me, what I also found, what was interesting was, there's some pictures here, and they even go on to say, like, maybe it's not so like macho sports centric, but just a little bit more like a hotel lobby or something like that, or a lounge versus, so it's a little bit, gender neutral depending on your, your preferences or whatever. Like me personally, I'm not a huge sports guy. So like having like local sports teams on the wall wouldn't be very, attractive, or enticing for me. They also go on to talk about how it's important that the men go to this stuff, because a lot of men think that because of advertising that low testosterone is going to solve all their problems. And that's really sketchy as well. And there's side effects of that. So it's really important that they actually go to real physicians that are actually doing the, checking what needs to be checked. And then there's some notes here on like how often you should be getting checked, like the physical exam annually. Yeah, I failed that 10 years in a row. But other things too, just getting your A1C test, which is your blood sugar, which is really important. It's one of the things that everybody should be getting looked into as you age regularly, especially if you're struggling with your weight. It's one of the most important health markers that most people don't know about, and that's especially related to diabetes and things. But again, what I started seeing into this was like, well, isn't this kind of what we do as coaches at the gym? And a lot of times what we have to do is we have to try to trick people into doing the things that we know that is healthy for them, and it's going to make their lives better, but they don't want to do it, or they don't think that they need it, or they think they need something else. And the one that I'm always going to is the cardio thing, because they think that, you know what, I need more cardio. I want to lose this weight. I want to be skinnier or whatever. You know, why are we lifting so much weight? I want to do a longer Metcon. I want to do more cardio. You know, I'm going to do the CrossFit class, and then I'm going to do the boot camp class right afterward, or even worse, the other way around, because they just want to they think that that's what they need, instead of saying like, no, actually, if you really want to like lean out, it's better that you lift weights and watch what you eat, you know, and change some of your dietary habits, versus just trying to, you know, do another, you know, add a spin class to your schedule when you're already coming to the gym 3 times per week. Another thing is making people do their mobility, right, and doing their rehab, prehab stuff. The stuff it's really hard to get people in the habit of doing it. You know, men and women, you know, they want to just get out there and do it. They don't want to stop, and they don't feel like, again, how is doing this activation thing for my shoulder, how is this going to make me skinnier, or how is this going to affect my performance in the workout? I just want to get the workout done and do really good, or I want to lose weight and stuff. And it's like, no, that shoulder thing is going to prevent you from injuring your shoulder, and make sure that you don't have to take a break or modify everything because your shoulder's hurt, you know, and it's a hard sell, you know. And I think that, you know, they're talking about kind of changing some of the environment, you know, so sometimes this is part of the reason why I like scoring workouts, is because it makes it more of a game, and you're not necessarily comparing to everybody else in the class. Some people do, but comparing to your old self and always trying to do a little bit better than before. You know, having it more of a social environment when you're doing classes where people are interacting and they don't even realize it, but that's really important for being happy and healthy, is having, you know, social interactions outside of people you work with, you know, and you know, getting to know people and getting invited to things and hearing about other people's weekends and all that stuff is really important. And I think it's one way we can entice people to come and eat their vegetables, right? And that's ultimately what a lot of the training that we do is, you've got to eat your vegetables. And then the dessert is the fun sweat con afterward, where you get to like, oh yeah, that workout was really hard. I must have burned a lot of calories and all that stuff. And you're like, yeah, no, okay, whatever. Good job. I mean, what other ways do you think that you can that we as coaches have to kind of almost trick people into doing the stuff that they need to do, without necessarily like saying like, okay, we're really being manipulative?
I don't know. It's tough to say, because we're not really in that manipulative part of the industry, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, there is definitely some shady manipulations and tricks stuff going on. But I think the Coach for Life model is more about like getting them to understand why they need to do these things, right? And educating them on, like, trying to educate them as opposed to tricking them. So I don't know. I can't really think of any really good examples, because it's more about, you know, making small changes while they're learning about what their lifestyle needs to be like, so that they can make their own decisions and you don't have to trick them. Right?
Yeah. I think, you know, speaking of like the slimy aspects of it, like a lot of times, you know, people will, you know, if there's a demand, they'll try to like meet the demand. Oh, I'm going to tell these people, you can just come to the gym 3 times a week and do this long 40-minute sweat session, and that's going to make you look like this picture I have of some model I got off of the internet, you know, and that's like, you know, setting up your restaurant and only selling junk food and really tasty foods, but people can't eat anywhere else, and so you're doing it because that's what they want. You know, like I always say, like, you know, letting the members dictate the programming is like having your 7-year-old pick dinner every night. It's going to be pizza and ice cream every night. and while pizza and ice cream is fine, you know, occasionally, but it's not a good long-term strategy. And the same thing goes where I think that, people are asking for it, so I'm going to give them this stuff. And it's like, when we know that that's not what they need to get to where they want to go, but you're doing it because they want it, and then you're going to tell them it's going to work, which is lying. right? Because it's not going to work. Same thing goes with, oh yeah, like you can do, follow this, buy this supplement and you'll get all these results, or again, it's just telling people what they want to hear, and
well, is it, when we were going over your programming, when you were kind of discussing when you do the trade-off between like a longer Metcon and a more or a less heavy lift, right? And then you can kind of like swap it, right? So it's kind of like the trade-off is if you can get through and do all the heavy shit, then at the end of the cycle, you get to go back to those long Metcons that people love, right? So there is a balance there. Physiologically, you do need both, obviously, right? But some people like to lift and some people like to run, right? So
yeah, and you can incorporate the fun stuff, and that's really where the art of programming comes in, where again, like I could make the programming maybe a little bit more effective from like a performance in the gym and results standpoint that way, but if it would be way more boring. And so I'm still trying to incorporate fun things, and sometimes I put things in workouts just to make it more interesting and less monotonous, and it's not for any magical programming benefit. And that's kind of one of the slimy things I see with certain gyms and programs is they're putting things in there just to make it seem more scientific or more like special, different, unique. Yeah. And it's like, that's not,
it's not, I will tell you.
Go ahead.
I will tell you one of the things that I do on a regular basis to manipulate, and I do with my kids. We always eat dinner around the table. Like all together, like we eat dinner as a family. But if I know that they haven't like really been eating all their vegetables and they haven't been getting enough protein, or like maybe, they've been skipping their dark greens every single night for a couple of nights in a row, then I'll make like a big soup or a big salad with just tons of vegetables in it, and put on a movie and let them eat dinner in front of the TV. Cause then they'll eat, like literally they'll just eat whatever is in front of them, right? That's one of the reasons why we have an obesity epidemic for kids, is because so many people eat while they're playing video games or watching TV that they don't notice their intake. But I do the opposite with vegetables.
Well, and that's like the improving the average, or measuring the most recent thing is like, like it's been a few days and they've been really giving me grief about this and I'm tired of fighting them on it. So I'm going to trick them into eating more vegetables. It's funny because the opposite with my son is if the TV's on, he doesn't eat at all. Like he just like, he'll put like the fork to his mouth and he'll put his fork down, and in 10 minutes will go by and he won't eat another bite. Even if it's something he likes. Like he's just so like, and he's been like that his whole life. And so like, we literally have to like turn off the TV and be like, what are you doing? And it's like, eat. They like force feed this kid. But no, that's a great example of like again, like with the programming too, like putting a Metcon after a lift is really just a way to entice people to come in and get their lifting in, eat their vegetables, and then they get their sweat on. I create the workout sometimes so they look really easy on paper. I'd say that's one of my oh, well, hello. That's one of the ways that I try to trick people into coming in, is it looks really easy on paper, or it looks fun on paper, and then it ends up being harder than they thought. So we're trying to give people less reasons to not come in. It's is it manipulative? It's like, yeah, but we're not totally lying. We're not lying or doing it for our own personal gain. So it's a little bit of manipulation to get people to what they want, right? To get them what they want. I think most people are okay with that. Like a little bit of like, oh, you got me. Like thank you for doing that and making me better, right?
Yeah.
So let me stop sharing the screen. So I think we'll wrap it up there. I think that I'm still fascinated by the whole like tricking men into going to the doctor more. But maybe we should figure out how to trick people into doing more research on women's problems. And I hope that changes. Like I said, I do think it's probably systemic because of the male dominated profession in the medical world and that's probably why a lot of the research has been that way. But it is interesting that again, men are engaging in these riskier behaviors and going to the doctor less. When we think about it from a fitness standpoint, again, I think most of the gyms that I worked with and all the gyms that I've owned, by far all the gyms that I've owned were more women than men. And I wonder if it's the same sort of mentality of like, I don't want to go to a class and be told how to work out because that's me needing help and seeming weak. And I think that, I can do it myself kind of mentality comes in too. And so I think that's why we don't see as many men in class type fitness environments. And can we change the environment to be a little bit more enticing for men to come to, less intimidating? Because again, they don't want to be weak, especially if all the women in the class are fitter than them, then it's an ego check, right? which is one of the reasons why, I always speculated why the gyms that I've always run, all the people there were really cool, because you can't be an egotistical jerk. You'll get washed out real quick when all the women keep doing more weight than you and beating you in every workout. If you let that bother you, you won't stick around, right? And so all the people who are left are the cool people who are just there to work on themselves and like seeing other people succeed, right?
Easy.
I know there's probably more you want to rant about this article about the.
No, I'm done. If I go on, I'll go on forever.
I like how you had prearranged statistics. You totally blindsided me. I was like, whoa, hey, I don't know. I didn't do a bunch of research for that angle, but it was an interesting perspective. So going back to the first part we talked about, think about the averages. Think about what you can measure simply and easily, and just over the last few days up to about a week. Start small. Don't try to like get really detailed. I think a lot of people will decide they're going to make a change, and they make all these plans and they detail all this stuff out, and it's all this stuff in the future when it's like, well, you just need to worry. Okay, that it's good to kind of do some of that planning, but you didn't do anything, right? Planning has this weird effect where we can spend all this time planning and organizing and feel this sense of accomplishment, and we actually didn't do anything. Right?
Anything. Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought about that.
Oh yeah, I know it's something they've researched actually that people feel like they've accomplished a lot. You get your schedule all planned out. I'm gonna do all these things, like this whole program I'm gonna follow, and all right, day 1, and by like day 3, it's like, oh, that's all gone out the window, and you really didn't get any progress. And so it's more important that again you spend that energy and time again just focusing on the now, right? Cool. That's it, guys. Yeah. Thanks, Gigi, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Keep sending us articles and stuff you want us to talk about, especially if there's something that seems confusing or contradictory to what you already believed, and we will pick it apart and break it down so that something that you can learn from. See you later.
Bye.